Trainers, this is one of, well, it is the hardest session we do. It builds an intensity. You start with 50-meter sprints, then you go 100-meter sprints, then you go 200-meter sprints, you do exercises in between. You've got to look after those new members. You've got to look after the people who are weakest. Tell them they can duck out, but we really try and push the fastest as hard as we can. So one element warm-up. We're looking for consistency and continuity through every session. So we're trying to get the same warm-up at every location, at every session. And this gives the members an opportunity to learn the warm-up, to do it each week, to get to know each other, and they get 5 or 10 minutes to talk to each other before we then move into the dynamic session. So the layout of the warm-up is 12 steps wide, 30 steps long. And every 5 steps I put down a cone. So then the actual warm-up, we do a very simple run, a dynamic stretch, and an isometric stretch. So we jog through the grid and then round the edge and back in at 50%. Then you go through a dynamic stretch. So for example, a side squat where you're going sideways, deep squat, a couple of steps, squat again. Then you come back in, and then we do a hamstring stretch, which is the isometric one. So just bouncing into a hamstring and maybe accelerating off. And then the other leg, and so on. Then we come back in. So you've done your run, you've done your dynamic stretch, you've done your isometric. When you get back in, we then go back into a run, but we build it from 50% sprint to a 60% sprint. Round the edge, jog gently in. When you get in, a new dynamic stretch. So this one could be facing sideways, twisting, bouncing. And then we come back in, a new isometric stretch. So this one might be a quad stretch, followed by a small acceleration, and then the other leg. Then you come back in, you go back into your run. So you're now 80%, so beg your pardon, 70% sprint. We need a dynamic exercise, so maybe a walking lunge with a stretch. So first off, just stretching the hips each side, and then maybe you go into a lunge with a twist. So lunging and rotating. And then further forward, you're going lunge and lift. Back in, another isometric exercise. So this time you might do not entirely isometric, but maybe a high kick. So just stretching the hamstrings off and kicking back to get the hip flexors, and so on. Around the edge, back in. We're now into 80%. See, 80% sprint through, new dynamic stretch. This time maybe side squats the other way, or twisting the other way, or changing directions. Back in, new isometric exercise. So this is high knee over a hurdle, for example. A couple of steps, other leg. So just trying, not necessarily isometric, but just taking it a bit more gently. Come back in, 90% sprint. Back in. This time another dynamic stretch. So this time maybe changing direction. So I'm explosive one way, explosive the other. Trying to really get the energy up for the group now. Trying to maybe push them so they can't talk quite so much. Back in, another isometric exercise. This one could be, again, actually, we'll go back into a sprint. So build the sprint up to 100% sprints here, and then finish with the last rotational exercise, and so on. So you really need to get the whole body working, building an intensity, 3 or 4 sprints at the end. This whole warm-up should last about 12 minutes every single time. Then we come off, we circle the group up, we dynamic exercise, so just rotating the hips and twisting the upper body, getting low. And as you're doing that, you then come up and ask everyone to go around their names, so shouting their names out, so even the new people get to know each other. And then we go into a very brief description of this week's session, and I'll be explaining each of those going forward. This session, for me, is one of the all-time one-element sessions. It works 50-meter sprints, 100-meter sprints, 200-meter sprints. It also works core and upper body. By the end of it, you'll be wriggling around on your back, desperate for more. Come along, go as hard as you can, dig deep, push yourself. Enjoy it. Okay, so this is the 50's, 100's, 200's. It sucks up quite a lot of time, and it's important we get it absolutely right. So you've set up the session with a 50-meter cone and a 100-meter cone in. Now the first set that we do is a set of 50's. You're going to get the team as one line, not as 2 groups, as one line to sprint to the 50's. You give them a time as they go through the 50-meter line, which will be between 7 and about 12 seconds, depending on their fitness. Once you get out to that 50-meter line, you realign on that line and wait for 30 seconds to come round on your stopwatch. On 30 seconds, you let them come back in again as fast as they can. Again, 7 to 12 second splits. That's the 50s. You do 6 reps of that and then finish. So the 100s, you've got a 100-meter line out there. We're going to do 1 rep a minute for 6 minutes again. You're sprinting as hard as you can to the 100-meter cone, and you rest when you get there. Time should be somewhere between sort of 10 and 25 seconds. 1 rep a minute, started every minute for 6 minutes. So here we've got the push 30, sprint 70, and it's pretty self-explanatory. There's 2 of us out here. One person's going to push 30 meters, so that's the warm-up grid. And once he's finished pushing the 30 meters, he goes round the person in front and sprints the other 70 to your 100-meter mark. The person next to them is trying to challenge them, trying to compete against them. You can suggest that they might want to tackle them, that sort of thing. Okay, Danny, hands on shoulders. So pushing 30, driving, I'm giving him some resistance. When we hit that 30-meter mark, we'll imagine it's here. Danny goes round and accelerates off, and I'm trying to catch him to the 100, and then they walk it back in, and then we do the same again, but the other person works. And then right at the end of the session, we come into 200's. So this is running to the 100-meter cone and back in as hard as you can. And you're just only going to be able to do 4 reps of this. So again, fast as possible, absolutely exhausting. People want to drop out, they can, but they're running to the 100-meter cone and back, 1 rep every 90 seconds for 4 reps. So we've come to the end of the session. We're looking to do a cool down or a stretch. A cool down, you might want to do a reverse shuttle run, so you go 100% to the longest cone and then decrease in energy as you come down. Then we're at about 55 minutes of the session. We've got a 5-minute stretch. Frankly, it doesn't have to be that good. You can explain to the members while you're stretching that actually isometric stretches are best done when their muscles are cold. I tend to just do, particularly in the winter when the ground's wet and cold, I do a quick salutation to the sun, or slow salutation to the sun, with a few extra stretches pushed in. You can do any stretch you like, but it needn't be more than about 5 minutes. As I'm going through it, I'll go through it now, but as I'm going through it, I also talk to the members about events coming up and about various things that have been good about the session, that sort of thing. So I tend to ask them to legs wide, roll forward, forehead touches the grass. Obviously, you can't get anywhere near the grass, especially if you're as inflexible as I am. Then hands hit the ground, feet go back, hips go high, chin goes low. Stretch that and hold that for longer than I'm going to do it, but not too long. Then hips go high, chin high. That's good. Then I go hips high again and just walk it back until I'm hanging again between the legs. Then I look to go wide and stretch an adductor out. And if you can push them low on that one, even better. If they're struggling with this, on one knee, leg out to the side. Then I come into the middle and the other side. All the time I'm talking to them about events coming up, what's going on at training, who's done particularly well during the session. And maybe I'll do a glute stretch as well, so bring the knee across to one hand and just drop into a glute stretch. Then the other leg, and so on. After I've done both of those, I might look into an adductor stretch, so into a one kneeling side, push the hip forward, kneeling side, hand high, and rotate away from that back leg. And again, holding for 30 seconds or so. While I'm in this position, I might go into a hamstring stretch. So that's pretty much it. Maybe finishing with a quad stretch. And I always end the sessions with getting the members as a whole group to face the sun, put their hands on the back of the head, shut the eyes, 3 or 4 long, slow, mindful breaths, just trying to bring them back into the moment, trying to take the energy, the heart rate down a bit. And then we stop. If we can get them to clap clap, and then head home. So hopefully it's feeling really positive at the end of the session.